Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, an intentional space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson. I'm an adoptive mom of an empathetic and self-aware 20-year-old son, Joe, who is launching into adulthood. I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. I'm also a certified coach helping primarily adoptive parents. Joey and I are committed to helping anyone impacted by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better too. So I wonder, listeners, have you ever had someone keep a secret from you? Or have you ever had someone keep a secret about you from you? Well, today's guest is Bethany Fraser, an adoptee and host of the Adoptee Diaries podcast, which is awesome. Go listen to that after you listen to this episode. She had a secret kept from her for her first 4 decades of life. Though she knew she was adopted, she didn't realize she was biracial, half Black and half white, until she was in her 40s. Her adoptive parents knew her ethnicity but kept it from her. Let's find out what that kind of deception does to an adopted person's identity, psyche, and relationships. I'm very grateful that you're here to share your story, Bethany. Welcome to Unraveling Adoption.
Hi, Beth. Thank you. Thank you. So happy to be here, and happy our mutual friend Beth Tyson introduced us to make the Beth trifecta.
Yes. So what did you know when you were growing up? What was the story that was told to you about your adoption?
So I don't remember how I was told I was adopted. I definitely was told I was adopted. I grew up with a brother who was 5 years older than me. We definitely did not look alike. I did not look like my family. So at some point, I knew I did not look like them, but I always knew that I was adopted. So that sort of made sense.
Okay.
And in terms of ethnicity, which became, and I know we're going to get into that today, but it became so much of my fire that fueled my search, was wondering what ethnicity I was. And I was told I was Russian.
Russian.
I was Russian.
Wow.
Yeah. And they would even pick people in their friend groups and say, hey, you look like this person. She's also Russian. You know, that olive skin, you know, those green eyes. You kind of look like her. And I was always like scratching my head. You know, I don't totally look like her, but okay, I guess I'm Russian.
Did you ever try to go down that road, like looking at Russian movies or those little dolls that break apart? Or, you know, did you go the Russian direction at all?
It's interesting that I must have not believed. I went with it, and I do not have a memory of really thinking like, oh, I am Russian and I'm going there, which actually that's an interesting question because I am, I think, a curious person. I really appreciate culture. I always used to watch other cultures and other people, and I love it. I loved it. I've traveled the world. I love immersion, but I guess I never really believed the Russian thing because I don't have a memory of really digging into that. And if I believed it, I would have completely been making food and probably even trying to speak. So that's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever really thought about that. And no, I guess I never really did believe them, although I didn't verbalize that.
Interesting. And were you in a very white community? Were there other biracial or mixed people in your school or community, or were you like the only one?
Yeah, no, really, really few. I've come across, I would say in my upbringing, I can remember another child who I went to elementary school with who was also adopted, and he happened to be mixed, and I knew it. And his white parents were very open. So he knew he was mixed, Black and white. And I was so drawn to him. So much so I remember, you know, because I get this question often, when did you know? How did you know? What was it's helpful to other adoptive parents that are raising children that are transracially adopted. So as early as 8 years old, I have a specific memory of this child in my class. There was no intention. I don't remember any conversations with my parents about, hey, you and him are both adopted. You're both mixed. You know, that never happened, but I was drawn to him. And I used to tell him I had to be his girlfriend or his sister, one or the other. I wanted us to be put in the play together as husband and wife, farmer and farmer's wife. You know, so I have specific second grade memories of me really being sort of like a magnetic pull to this kid.
Yes, you knew.
And I was very aware of his ethnicity. And I was very aware that his adopted parents, who were white, embraced and were open about his ethnicity. And it didn't make sense to me because I really look like him.
Yeah. Wow.
Right?
You could really see it.
Yeah. Outside of him, there's been a sprinkle of people. I definitely did not grow up in a diverse area at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you would have said, Mom and Dad, do I have any African-American in me, it feels like maybe I might be part Black. What would have happened? Or would that have even crossed your mind?
I did it. I have an answer for you because that's not even hypothetical. That really happened.
Okay.
A lot.
Okay.
I will say I specifically remember, I can't remember what age. I'm going to say maybe somewhere between 16, 18, 20, somewhere around there. I very much so remember saying to my mom, Mommy, when we're out in public, people probably think you're married to a Black man, right?
Yeah.
And it was always like, oh, why would my mother, by the way, sweetest like angel on the planet.
Okay.
Oh, why would they say that? And she's a super smart lady, super, super smart, but very passive. There was not a conversation. So I absolutely remember saying that to her. So
it just got shoved aside.
It's not a hypothetical. Yeah, for sure. And when we were out in public, I remember also when I was a little bit older, even I think when I have a 21-year-old son who, when he was little and my mother was visiting us, I remember going to the grocery store and the pharmacist at the grocery store was Cuban and he'd always have a little exchange with me in Spanish. And I spoke enough Spanish to be dangerous.
Okay.
And my mother said, oh, why does he think you know Spanish? And I'm like, Mom, I look like I could be Cuban, right? I look like I could speak Spanish. So I look like a native Spanish speaker if you look at me on the right day in the right light, right? Yeah. So I really was anything, and I was searching for everything that I could identify with that was non-white. But again, it was always a very aloof. Multiple opportunities came up when I was young and throughout even my young adult into my adult years where my parents and I could have had a really serious conversation and we never did.
It just got tossed. Oh, let's look over here instead.
Oh, pass the peas. Yeah. Pass the peas. Why would you ever think that?
And to your knowledge, why all of that deception? What was behind that?
So this is like where I try to stick to my 4 agreements that I learned from Don Ruiz Miguel, right? I really deeply have tried in these past couple of years not to make assumptions and not to take anything personally, but it's been really, really hard. The hardest thing that I have landed on and had to grapple with is, were my parents racist? Yeah. Did my parents literally know that I was mixed with Black African roots and truly they were racist, could not deal with it and said, let's pass her as white. Okay. So that's like the worst days. And that's the worst of it for me. On other times, because of conversations with family and friends, since this sort of discovery, I think there's a chance that my dad's father, they were immigrants from Czechoslovakia. And I have come to the conclusion that he probably wasn't accepting of them adopting a little mixed girl.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and just ignore her mixedness.
Okay.
Yep. So I do think that there was a little bit of that. I won't even say I think. I now have concrete evidence from other family members that was a thing. Okay. So I'm working on stopping to sugarcoat it. I find myself sugarcoating it because I don't want to be like offensive, but the truth is the truth and that is what it is. That makes sense to me too, because I have always had this narrative that my dad's dad did not like me. And when I speak to my brother and then other cousins, they did not have that same experience. My dad used to poo-poo that thought off. I would, if you haven't noticed, now that we know each other a little bit, I just speak it. Like I don't have a filter and I never had one.
Okay.
So these thoughts were things that I said. I might have not said them right. Yeah. They could have possibly been guided into a more productive conversation with some third-party assistance, but we didn't have that. And I would just blurt these things out and they were just totally swept away.
Your parents were very filtered, it sounds like. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I was born in the 70s. Yeah. The whole circumstances surrounding my adoption, ultimately, I think came down to race as well. So it's been a hard sort of nut for me to chew because it upsets me that this exists in my family, in my experience. And my discovery happened in 2020. That's when I did the Ancestry search. So now we're just shy of 4 years since the time I really found this out. So I'm able to talk about it now and try to make something productive happen out of this conversation. But originally I was not a happy camper. I could not sit here and talk to you about this 4 years ago.
Oh, no. Interesting. Okay. So it was your choice to do an ancestry test. Was it because you wanted to find out your ethnicity or just everybody was getting them for Christmas, or what prompted you to do the ancestry test?
Yes. I was prompted by my now partner. When we originally got together, I was already in reunion with my birth mother's side of the family.
Okay.
And he was meeting me at my birth mother side of the family for Thanksgiving. We didn't live together at the time. We were in a long distance relationship. I'll make this story really short, but it's important because we need people like this in our lives, I think, if we're grappling. So I grappled. Nobody would tell me, not even when I met my birth mother.
And your birth mom's white. So yeah,
she is white. And again, a whole nother session, we could talk about, break down that whole reunion and relationship. But just to kind of get to the answer, he was the one that inspired me. My partner was the one that inspired me after meeting her and hearing me. He was like, honey, there's no reason you shouldn't know this information. You're literally connected to the woman that can tell you. Yeah. Even assuming your adoptive parents can't tell you, maybe they didn't have the information. I did not know then what I know now about what my adoptive parents knew. So I just sort of accepted not knowing, and he was not having it.
Okay.
He was like, you have connection with her. You should know this. Once she made very clear to him, as she had to me many years prior, she wasn't willing to tell that side of the story. He one day said, you can find this information out. Why don't you consider doing an ancestry search, DNA test? And after some back and forth, I did.
Okay. And then you found out you were mixed, part African and some other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad's side of the family is very mixed, all beautiful kinds of shades of brown. Okay. All kinds of shades on my dad's side of the family. I think his side represented 11 countries on that sort of half of if anybody's done Ancestry DNA test. I did the Ancestry DNA and I got the pie chart and 50% was totally my mom, white, Eastern European, actually Jewish. And then my whole other side of the chart was really mixed with about 32 or so % from African countries. And then there were some other European countries in there. Now that I'm in reunion, I know kind of where that all comes from. But it was such a big deal to me. I say the Jewish piece because I realized after my ancestry search that I did descend from Holocaust survivors. I did descend from slaves. Wow. And all of a sudden I got this like renewed, first of all, sort of sense of purpose, identity, talk about being tied to culture. I started deep diving, went to Israel, started celebrating Jewish religion. I grew up Christian. Okay. So my kind of joke that I would say was, I just found out 4 years ago, I was raised a white Christian and I was born a Black Jew.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So I feel like my body was probably in some sort of conflict with who I was being and who I was actually born and who I was. Right. So
layers and layers.
It was a lot to unpack.
There's a lot of intergenerational trauma there on both sides. Is it common for Black people to have such a mix of cultures and countries in their DNA?
Another great question. Yeah. So I sat on a panel with Tony Burrows, if I'm not mistaken, and he is a well-known Black genealogist. Okay. Because Black families, typically, we lose the lineage at some point. Yeah. I mean, our names might not even be our names, right? Yeah. So yes, I think it's common. What I have found, sure, it's common. We lost names, we lost culture, we lost religion, language, all those things. So it was interesting when I met Tony. He was like, yeah, you have two sides of ancestry that come from a path that would be difficult to trace back.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. You can totally see like the whole slave trade and what it did to my family, like via my ancestry.
Oh, I'm getting shivers and just the impact. I can't imagine what that must have been like to open that email or whatever you got from Ancestry. Yeah. And just trying to, I don't know how long it will take you to process it all, probably the rest of your life, to process what it really means to be descended from Holocaust survivors and enslaved people. And
some people could exist and not care. Some people could exist and not care. Like I care deeply. Mm-hmm. And I always did. I always felt like this curiosity to know everything. I always want to know all the facts. Like it really is my nature. Mm-hmm. My paternal grandmother, who I now know, my biological paternal grandmother, tells me I get it from her. She's a naturally curious person. Aww. So to be that way and not be able to sort of know what blood is flowing through my veins deeply bothered me.
Yeah, I bet.
I understand some people might not care, but for me, it was really important.
Yeah, I bet you sound very self-aware and engaged in your own being, not just like living on the surface. But how did that impact you before you found out? So the first 40 years, what did that look like? Were you seeking in other ways? Were you self-destructive? How did that manifest?
So yes, I've been working a lot on my self-awareness, and I've been working a lot since discovery and since reunion. I didn't realize until I had the reunion, and not even the reunion with the humans responsible, right? My biological families, just to have the ancestry piece, which is why I did the test. I didn't do it for reunion. I did it for ethnicity.
Okay. You just wanted to know what you were.
That is why I did the test initially. And then I kind of was like, well, I mean, I'm matching with people. Why not? So that was actually an afterthought. It could have been also self-preservation. If I didn't meet with anybody, then I needed to be okay with it. So perhaps that's why I told myself it was only for ethnicity purposes. How did it sit with me? I now think, looking back, I was always looking to fit in somewhere.
Okay.
So to me, it looks like feeling left out. To me, it looks like always trying to fit in and chameleon wherever I was. I was a flight attendant from 98 to 2002.
Okay.
So I'm traveling the world and I'm meeting with different people.
Wow.
I noticed in all the different places that I was, I just try to like be them.
Okay.
Right. So Bethany did not show up confident with this sense of self. I would show up, kind of figure out how and who I should be in this moment. So I have a very vivid memory. My college boyfriend called me his Peruvian princess. Now, I didn't know if I was Peruvian or not, but I would be like, okay, call me if that's what you want to call me your Peruvian princess. So to me, when I think about the words of how I showed up before I knew this information, it was just searching for a place to fit, searching for a sense of self, searching for belonging and identity. I knew it wasn't happening. I was loved and supported in my family, but I didn't fit in there culturally. I mentioned earlier, my parents who adopted me, my father's parents were from Czechoslovakia, and they had such a strong Slovakian accent in the food. And my cousins' wives would make these horn cookie type things. And all these things were really deeply steeped in Eastern European tradition. And I was like, I am not that. I know I am not that.
Okay. Wow.
Which is interesting because I am technically on my biological mother's side, Eastern European, but that didn't sit with me as being me.
Okay. Interesting.
So I think I always felt a little displaced, but it could be super masked because I was outgoing and I was extroverted and I was tumbling down the street, doing cartwheels, making friends with the neighbors in all our new neighborhoods after moves, so it looks like on the surface, Bethany is this beautiful, well-adjusted baby and adult. But now I know I was not as confident as I appeared or as secure as I appeared, not even remotely close.
So you were kind of masked or just trying to please other people,
all the time.
Trying to fit in, trying to make your way. Wow. It's interesting that you were a flight attendant. It's like, that fits.
Oh, yeah.
That fits. Somebody's trying to figure out where they go, where they fit in. Okay. I can see that.
And I wouldn't have even, until I started joining these conversations, I intentionally sought out other adoptees. I'll say in like maybe the summer of 22. So for the last 2 years, I've been actively part of these adoptee conversations and part of the adoptee community. So as I sought out other people that were sharing their stories, first of all, I was blown away. It's kind of ironic I'm sitting here telling my story because back then I was just like this teeny little fly on the wall watching everybody else talk about it. Somehow I wound up reaching out to a few folks and then getting myself immersed into it as well. But it didn't just happen naturally overnight. It was scary to speak out and it's scary to think about uncovering what has been this secret forever or something we just don't talk about. So that took me a couple years after discovery. It also took my parents getting sick. My father who raised me passed. My mom has dementia. So in some ways I waited until it was safe and they wouldn't be offended or upset because I really deeply didn't want to upset them either. I did a lot of this searching outside of their knowledge because I did not think that they would understand. And all these sentiments like not feeling like a fit in, wanting to people please. I now know that is part of the adoptee experience. So I used to think, gosh, that's ironic. I have that feeling too. But, after you hear it time and time and time again, it's not ironic. It's part of the adoptee identity. The adoptee experience could include.
Even taking away the race part, you can take away the race part and still the adoptees feel that they don't belong.
It's a layer. It's a layer. And I think when we get it right, we're talking about it with our kids and with our parents. And when we're not getting it right, we're ignoring it. And we're like, nobody needs to know. Even I think about like, if I was a blonde hair, blue eyed child that looked like I fit in my family, I would, to your point, still potentially be feeling this way. Yeah. Maybe a little less, but it still would be there. And the opportunity would be missed if we didn't talk about it in our family.
Yeah. So let's go there before we close. What advice do you have for adoptive parents? I'm sure you would tell them not to hide a person's ethnicity for their whole life. What values would you like adoptive parents to hold?
So I'm very much so operating now completely under the truth, trust, and transparency pillars.
Yes.
Like if you're going to do it, if you're even thinking about it, is it truthful? Is it going to build trust with your child? And are you being transparent about all the information that you have? Yeah. And if you can promise yourself to be true to those things, then I think it's going to elicit conversations. Not that they're going to be easy conversations, but they're going to be real. And in the long run, I think the parent-child relationship will win.
Yes, yes, yes. If you want to stay connected with your kids, don't lie to them the whole time. And what about a lot of times parents, they're trying to protect you. And I don't know, maybe your parents were trying to protect you in some sort of way, but what if, the birth parent is in jail or was raped or has some really uncomfortable truth in there? Are we still telling them the truth?
Okay, so I would definitely hope that there is a certified professional
therapist
in that conversation to help. Yep. That would be like my number one. I have biological children. I still need probably a third party to help me communicate with them, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a huge advocate for obviously therapy and support from somebody that you trust and that was recommended. That's skilled in adoption specifically. I did not even know that existed, but now I know it does. So find somebody like that. And then number two, yes, because if it's the truth that the parent is in jail, is it the truth? Yes. Are you going to build trust with them? Yes. Are you being transparent about the information that you have? Yes. And so like you're checking those boxes. And so, yes, you have to find a way to tell your child the truth about their biological parent. And that's why I think I am no therapist. But yeah, even though that could be difficult to understand in an age appropriate way, you have to find a way to tell them that because they will find it out now. I would operate under the assumption that all the truths can be found out now, given this technology and the age that we live in. So
DNA, Googling. Yeah, anything. Yeah, for sure. By the way, were there people that knew that you were biracial in your life that didn't tell you besides your parents?
Yeah. I mean, anybody that knew the truth about me, please stand up. I'm still sort of sorting through that.
Yeah.
The reason why I know that my parents knew is because 2 hours after my father who raised me died, I was in the room alone with him. I was there when he transitioned. It was just him and me. And a couple hours after he died, I went over to friends who have known my parents since college. And they're the ones that actually shared with me that they knew. I shared with them my DNA. Hey, guess what? I did Ancestry DNA. I was with them and I told them and I showed them and they weren't surprised. And I'm thinking, wait, you guys, how are you not surprised? We had no idea. And she's like, honey, we knew. And I'm thinking you suspected or you knew. And that's how I found out that my parents knew. They got a call from the adoption agency. We have a little girl. You need to come see her. I was labeled special needs. And back then, special needs was because I was biracial. Oh. The way the story goes is my dad said, does she have 3 eyes? They said no, 2. And he was basically like, we'll take her. Okay. And that was that. I've called other family members since. And I mean, whether they're saying it outright or not, they're all saying, yes, we knew. Yeah. So I don't know if they really knew that from my parents or if they just knew because they looked at me and knew. Yeah. But yes, now that I'm talking about it, I have not found anybody that was like, wow, really? I didn't think so. Oh, okay. Nobody said that. Yeah.
Right. So they either knew explicitly or implicitly.
Yes.
I am so sorry that happened to you. And I hope that many people listening will take to heart your message and even the little things that we kind of keep from our kids. Maybe it's time to have one of those sit down conversations with a therapist present or involved in supporting. And our kids deserve to know their own truth about their own life. Yeah. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing this. I hope that it didn't totally wipe you out. I'm sure this is a lot of emotional energy to do. So appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, my heart still completely pounds when I have this conversation. I feel like this sense of responsibility now that I have all this information to share it because somebody said to me one day, what if a little you needs you to speak to their parents so they don't have to go through what you went through? And I was like, oh, done. Like that knocked me out. And I was like, done. Now I urgently need to share the story.
You've got your dharma set for the rest of your life.
Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate it. It's still hard to talk about, but
I'm sure
it's also one of the easier things for me to talk about because I'm just speaking about my experience. So people don't have to agree with me or the words that I'm saying or the things that I feel. But guess what? I thankfully don't care because this is how I feel and this is my experience. And that confidence is something that I now have that I know I never had before.
Nice.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, if people wanted to get a hold of you, how could they do that?
Last year, I launched the Adoptee Diaries, which is my podcast where I'm interviewing other people within the adoption constellation. My main goal is to just kind of create space for other adoptees to speak. I was telling you earlier, I intentionally called it the Adoptee Diaries because I feel like I'm really kind of putting it all out there about how I felt and what I found. So it really is personal to me as I'm exploring and uncovering these different feelings and resources that are available. I'm making sure that I'm introducing those to other adoptees through this podcast. So you can find me on Instagram and the podcast, again, the Adoptee Diaries, and Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, Bethany Fraser. I'm just starting to sort this out and speak to other groups about this. So I'm happy to, I always say, like any adoptees, I think specifically because I've gone through this process, it feels super important that other mixed or biracial adoptees, other adoptees in transracial adoptee experiences, other adoptees that might be searching. I always say, if you have searched, if you've thought about searching, if you want to search, that requires support and community, because I did have a successful reunion with both of my birth parents. It's not been without its challenges. But I'm happy to share the way that I got through some of the tough stuff, which I'm still getting through. So I think the best place to find me is the Adoptee Diaries on Instagram.
Okay. And I will definitely link all those things. And I encourage people to listen to your very recent episodes with your dad, your birth dad. I've only heard the first one, but I'm going to go listen to the second one as soon as we're done here. And your dad is just amazing. And it's such a wonderful episode, and just kind of everything comes back around for you. And so go listen to Bethany and her dad. It was just lovely.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. And I appreciate it. And I always do want to make sure that I say I grew up in a very loving and supportive home. So some of us haven't even had that experience, right?
Right.
So I always want to just stress all the love and the support and the privilege that I grew up with. Still, I had this need to fit in. So it doesn't matter how good we think we're parenting.
That's right.
Our children are still going to potentially have these urges to connect with where they came from. And in my case, it was always there, but it really started to come out when I had kids and when I got into adulthood and when I started to experience life, it became even more pressing.
Yeah.
So we might think, oh gosh, we skated through the teen years and the trouble years and we got through it. High five. And then it could come back because it's not just like an act that happened and it's done. It is really an identity that we keep for life, and it could ebb and flow with how it's impacting us and how we're showing up. So the more education that prospective parents or adoptive parents have, obviously through all of us, they'd be wise to listen and take what they find helpful and leave what they don't. But at least they tried to do the best thing they could by their kids.
Yes, I always encourage adoptive parents like me to listen. Just listen to adult adoptees that are telling their stories. And so you're a great example of that, and so thoughtful and so insightful and honest. And I appreciate that very much. As an adoptive parent, I learned a lot from you. So thank you very much for being on and sharing your story.
Thank you, Beth. I appreciate you too. Thank you.
So thank you everyone for listening. Please share this episode with anyone you know who might be raising a biracial or transracially adopted child, and anyone in the adoption constellation, or even teachers, therapists, healthcare workers that might not be fully aware of these impacts of these secrets and identity issues. So share away. And in case any of you are just wondering, but how else can I support Unraveling Adoption? Well, let me give you a specific way. We have a Patreon account. Patreon is a great way to support artists and creators directly. It makes it super easy. patreon.com/unraveling adoption is where you'll find us. And for any amount, $5, $10, $25 or more a month, you'll get certain benefits like early podcast episode releases, access to our new Adoption on Screen database, and 50% off live events. I want to say a special gigantic thank you to our newest Patreon member, Miriam Freeman, who happens to also be my mentor, who taught me the coaching method that I use that's based on the work of Virginia Satir through the Virginia Satir Global Network. And I'm super grateful that Miriam is in my life and super grateful that she is supporting our mission here by supporting us financially and with moral support. So thanks, Miriam. Thank you all for listening. And Bethany and I want you all to stay safe.